Welcome to today's deep dive. If you've ever looked around your office or, your Zoom screen and just wondered why some teams seem to collaborate so effortlessly while others are constantly on the verge of a total meltdown, you are definitely in the right place today.
Yeah, it's such a universal experience, right? And today, we're really getting into the hidden emotional currents that basically dictate whether we succeed or fail at work.
Exactly. And to do that, we are grounding our conversation in this incredible book. It's called Working Well: How to Build a Happier, Healthier Workplace Through the Science of Attunement. And it's by Nidhi Tewari. She's actually a licensed therapist who transitioned into becoming a corporate consultant.
Which is such a unique perspective to bring to the corporate world. I mean, our whole mission for this deep dive is to give you, the listener, a real shortcut. We want you to be totally clued in on these invisible dynamics.
Right, and to show you why this concept of attunement, why it's rapidly becoming the ultimate unoutsourceable skill in the modern workplace. You really can't fake this stuff.
You really can't. It's honestly the dividing line between companies that thrive under pressure and companies that just completely fracture. But to really grasp why this matters on a practical day-to-day level, we kind of have to look at how quickly we all misjudge the people we work with.
Oh, absolutely. Which actually brings me to this scenario I want you listening right now to just imagine for a second. Think about a coworker who has suddenly started showing up 20 minutes late to work every single day.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
We've all known someone like that.
Right. And they're missing deadlines. They are constantly distracted in meetings. They're heavily relying on the rest of the team to just cover their assignments. Basically, they are totally dropping the ball. What is your immediate thought about this person?
If you're being honest, you're probably pretty annoyed.
Exactly. You're probably assuming they're a slacker. You might even think, they should be fired because they're dragging everyone else down. But, and here is the massive twist from the book, that exact slacker employee was actually the author, Nidhi Tewari. Yeah, and the reason she was suddenly failing at her job. She was navigating this just devastating trauma. Her 25-year-old best friend was dying from terminal brain cancer.
God, that just completely reframes the entire situation, doesn't it?
Completely.
And it shows how when we don't have the full picture, our brains just rush to fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
And we usually fill them in with these incredibly harsh conclusions based on, totally incomplete information. We just fundamentally misread the people right in front of us.
Yeah, and Tewari's own career path is this perfect illustration of the profound cost of getting this wrong, both for the person and the company. Her experience is honestly a masterclass in the difference between a toxic culture and an attuned one.
Let's talk about her first workplace during that time, because that story is rough. She was in the depths of her grief, and her boss actually did this little pop-in at her desk with a cup of coffee.
Which on the surface sounds so nice, right? Like a supportive manager?
Right, but it was actually a trap. The boss was literally just trying to catch her in the act of being late so she could reprimand her. I mean, the unwritten rule of that company culture was that she had to completely compartmentalize her grief and just perform as if absolutely nothing was wrong.
Which is just, biologically and psychologically, that's an impossible standard.
It really is. Forcing someone to mask that level of pain, it totally destroys any sense of psychological safety. So, unsurprisingly, she ended up leaving that job. But then you contrast that massive failure with the second agency she joined.
Yeah, she started this new job right before her friend Laura actually passed away. And this part of the book is just incredible. She had barely started. She had 0 accrued paid time off.
None at all.
Right. And her new colleagues didn't even really know her yet. But when she got the news about her friend, her new boss didn't even hesitate. They told her to take unlimited time to heal. They adjusted her hours so she could come in late without any penalty whatsoever.
And the coworkers stepped up too, right?
Mm-hmm. They did. They didn't do that thing where people awkwardly avoid the subject. They literally sat with her while she cried, and they asked her to share stories about Laura just to keep her memory alive. And that right there is what Tewari calls ultimate attunement.
What's fascinating here is the mechanics of what that leadership team actually did. Because attunement is not about managers acting like unlicensed therapists for their team. It's about creating a structural foundation of psychological safety so people can just show up as human beings.
Yeah, exactly.
And if leadership needs a bottom line reason to care about this, because some always do, the financial and cultural imperative is just massive. Replacing a single employee costs an organization an average of $30,000.
$30,000, that is wild.
Right. And beyond those hard costs, the feeling of isolation, that creeping sense that no one at work actually sees you or supports you, that is one of the biggest silent drivers of employee burnout globally.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit, because anyone who has sat through a corporate training seminar in like the last decade has heard a ton about emotional intelligence, or EQ. But this book draws a pretty hard line and focuses heavily on relational intelligence, or RQ.
Yeah, that distinction is crucial.
I really want to make sure we understand the difference. So if EQ is like learning how to perfectly tune your own instrument in a totally soundproof room, so managing your own internal emotional state, RQ, is learning how to walk out onto the stage, sit in the symphony, and actually read the tempo of the other musicians.
I love that analogy. It hits the nail on the head.
Right. It's that ability to hold space for disparate realities at the same exact time.
Because it highlights the limitation of EQ. Like, emotional intelligence basically stops at your own emotional boundary. Relational intelligence is the bridge that connects you to someone else's reality. But to understand why we are so notoriously bad at building that bridge in these high-stakes corporate environments, we have to look past the buzzwords and actually dive into our biology.
Wait, our biology? Like a physical biology?
Yeah, exactly. The science of interpersonal neurobiology. It shows us that human beings do not operate in silos.
We are quite literally wired to pick up on each other.
We are. When we say our bodies sync up, we aren't being metaphorical. We are talking about actual, measurable biological mechanisms involving things like mirror neurons and the vagus nerve. The book points to this really fascinating study from 2021.
Oh, the heartbeat one.
Yes. It demonstrated that when people listen to the exact same narrative story, their heart rates physically synchronize.
That is just mind-blowing to me.
I know. When you hear about someone else's stressful experience, your brain actually simulates that experience. Your biological state is actively influenced by the physiological states of the people around you. We basically co-regulate or co-dysregulate each other's nervous systems all day long.
Which means if a manager is secretly panicking about, say, a huge Q4 revenue project, it doesn't matter if they use all the right calm, polished corporate buzzwords in the meeting.
Exactly. Their team's nervous systems are physically picking up on that underlying panic anyway. They will feel the threat, even if they can't articulate why. And the way each individual team member interprets and reacts to those physical threat signals is almost entirely dictated by their past.
Right, our childhood blueprints. Tewari shares this really powerful personal story to explain this. When she was in 3rd grade, her grandfather, her dadaji, passed away, and she just broke down sobbing in the middle of her classroom.
And her teacher's reaction was amazing.
Mrs. Shapiro. Yeah, she immediately got down on her knees, matching Tewari's physical level, and just held space for that grief. She didn't try to rush her or fix it or tell her to quiet down. It was a perfect model of attunement.
But then she also had a toxic algebra teacher who did the exact opposite.
Oh, that teacher was the worst. Publicly shaming and humiliating her in front of the whole class just for not understanding math problems. And the scary part is that those early childhood blueprints follow us straight into the corporate boardroom.
They absolutely do. When we hit a stressful situation at work, our brains bypass logic and we just default to our basic ingrained trauma responses. Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
The book gives some highly relatable examples of this in the workplace. There's Jeremy, who gets so overwhelmed by this massive data project that he just flees. His flight response is literally avoiding all emails and Slack messages about the project.
We've all seen him, Jeremy. And then there's Connor, this new manager who hits a wall of stress and completely freezes. He becomes just utterly incapable of making even the simplest daily decisions.
Yeah, and then there's Teresa, who fawns. Her trauma response is just pure people-pleasing, saying yes to every single project and boundary violation until she drives herself straight into severe medical burnout.
It's so common. But I know some people are probably thinking right now.
Yeah, I actually want to push pause here too, because I can hear some of our listeners getting a little skeptical.
Yeah.
Like, wait, so when my coworker gets overly defensive and starts a yelling match about a minor typo on a spreadsheet, I'm supposed to play therapist and realize they're just having a childhood trauma response.
Right. It feels like an excuse.
Yeah, it feels like we're just excusing toxic behavior.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, understanding these biological responses has absolutely nothing to do with excusing bad behavior. It's really about giving you, the observer, the tools to accurately read the room.
Okay, how so?
Because reacting to a triggered coworker with logic is basically like trying to update the software on a computer that is currently on fire.
Oh, wow.
You have to put the fire out first.
Yeah.
If you recognize that the spreadsheet argument is actually a fight response, which is likely triggered by some deep-seated fear of inadequacy or public shaming, You stop taking their anger personally.
Right. It gives you that emotional distance.
Exactly. The distance required to de-escalate the situation rather than getting defensive yourself and just pouring gasoline on the fire.
And that biological hijack of that fire, it happens so incredibly fast. The book uses a very famous example to illustrate this perfectly, the Will Smith Oscar slap.
Oh, yeah. Such a clear example of an amygdala hijack.
Totally. In that moment, there was this massive physiological buildup of anger, a literal chemical flush of cortisol and adrenaline flooding his body. And that flush completely bypassed his prefrontal cortex, which is, the logical, rational, consequence-weighing part of the brain.
The amygdala, that primitive threat detector, just entirely took over.
And because he didn't regulate that flush, it resulted in a disastrous, career-altering physical reaction on live television.
And understanding the chemical flush is so critical if you want to survive the modern workplace. There's this neurological research by Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor, and it shows that the actual emotion-triggering chemical flush in the human body only lasts for about 90 seconds.
Wait, really? Only 90 seconds?
Yeah. From the moment the trigger hits to the moment the chemicals metabolize and flush out of your bloodstream is just 1 minute and 30 seconds. If you can recognize it happening and just wait out that 90-second window without acting, typing an angry email, or speaking, the chemicals dissipate.
That is wild.
Your prefrontal cortex comes back online, and you actually regain conscious control of your choices.
But waiting out those 90 seconds when you feel like you are actively under attack is incredibly difficult. So to help us actually survive that window, Tewari introduces the reset method. It's an acronym. R is for recognize the physical signs, like realizing your heart is racing, your palms are sweating, or your jaw is clenching.
E is for name the emotions you're feeling.
Right. S is for soothe the body. E is for explore the connection between your past blueprints and the present trigger. And T is for tell a trusted person to help you co-regulate later on.
We desperately need a framework like this, honestly, because the workplace is just full of completely invisible triggers.
Oh, absolutely.
Take the dreaded, vague calendar invite from a boss that just says, "Can we talk?"
Ugh, my stomach just dropped hearing that. That is a classic universal trigger.
It really is, especially for a neurodivergent employee or, frankly, anyone dealing with workplace anxiety. That vague invite instantly triggers something called rejection-sensitive dysphoria.
And this isn't just like a mental panic spiral, right? It's an intense physiological pain response to perceived rejection. Their brain immediately assumes they are about to be fired, and the body reacts as if it's in actual physical danger.
Exactly. And the solution for managers here is so wildly simple. Like Brené Brown says, clear is kind. Just add 10 seconds of context to the invite. Can we talk about the Q3 marketing goals? Boom.
Crisis averted. The nervous system stays regulated. But here's where it gets really interesting for me. I completely understand the theory of this reset method. But how is a busy professional actually supposed to soothe themselves in the middle of a tense boardroom meeting without looking totally ridiculous?
Right, you can't exactly roll out a yoga mat.
Exactly. You can't drop to the floor and start doing deep breathing exercises while the CEO is reviewing quarterly losses.
Which is exactly why stealth grounding techniques become essential tools. These are ways to manage your physiology without anyone else in the room even noticing.
Okay, I love that. Like what?
So you can use the 5 senses method right at your desk while maintaining eye contact. You silently identify 5 things you can see in the room, 4 things you can physically touch, like your chair or a pen, 3 things you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste.
That's great because it forces your brain out of the panic, right?
Yes, it forces your brain to process immediate, tangible sensory data, which physically pulls your neural pathways out of the theoretical anxiety loop. Or alternatively, you can use a calm or safe place visualization. Tewari uses the internal cue word Davos.
Like the city in Switzerland.
Yeah. When she thinks that word, it instantly recalls the physical sensation of this very peaceful train ride she took through the Swiss Alps. By mentally anchoring to that specific sensory memory, she forces her nervous system back to a regulated state.
Okay, so let's say you've done that. You survived the 90 seconds. You used your stealth grounding. Your prefrontal cortex is back online. Now you actually have to communicate with the person who triggered you.
And this is where things usually fall apart.
Right, and this is where the book introduces the concept of the connection gap. This gap opens up when what you emotionally need from a conversation completely mismatches what the other person is giving you.
Oh, like the story about Brandy.
Yes. The book mentions this highly toxic manager named Brandy. She would interrogate her team, relentlessly shame them for giving wrong answers, and then she would genuinely wonder why everyone sat in terrified, awkward silence during her brainstorming sessions.
It's so painfully oblivious. With every critical word, she was widening the connection gap because she was entirely misattuned to their basic need for safety.
So to help us navigate this, Tewari breaks down our default communication archetypes into another acronym. FACE. F-A-C-E is for fixers.
Oh, the fixers. These are the people who, the second you share a problem, they jump straight to offering solutions. Or, recommending a new ashwagandha supplement they just read about.
Yes, it's always a supplement.
Always. And A is for avoiders, who desperately want to escape the discomfort. So they just change the subject or throw toxic positivity at you.
Like saying, well, everything happens for a reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So invalidating. C is for connectors, who try to relate to your pain by immediately sharing a story about their own similar experience. And finally, E is for explorers, who don't assume they know how you feel, but instead use deep, curiosity-based questions to understand your specific reality.
Now, I have to admit, when I first read this part, I kind of felt the need to defend the connectors.
Really? How come?
Because empathy is fundamentally about relating to each other, right? Sharing a similar experience feels like a great way to show someone, hey, you aren't alone, I understand what you're going through.
It's a very common and super well-intentioned assumption. But Tewari uses this brilliant swimming analogy to explain why it actually backfires a lot of the time.
Okay, break that down for me.
So think of it like this. Fixers and avoiders, they just skim the very surface of the water. They refuse to even get wet. Connectors do get in the water, but they only swim just below the surface. They mean well, but by constantly bringing the focus back to their own experiences, they accidentally turn the conversation into a competition of who had it worse.
Oh, I hate that. When you tell someone you're tired and they say, you think you're tired, I only got 3 hours of sleep.
Exactly. It leaves the original speaker feeling entirely unseen. But explorers, they're the only ones who actually dive deep. They're willing to put their own ego and their own anecdotes aside. They hold space for the other person's unique reality, asking questions that allow the other person to process their own emotions.
That is so powerful. But here's the thing. Even if you perfect this face communication on an individual level, like you become the ultimate explorer, it completely falls apart if the environment you're communicating in is fundamentally broken.
Yeah, you can't out-communicate a toxic culture.
Right. Let's look at what happens when you zoom out and look at an entire company culture. When leadership completely lacks attunement, when the people at the top are just oblivious to the emotional reality of their workforce, you get what the book calls trustless teams.
And the sources provide some absolutely staggering examples of this. I mean, breathtaking examples of corporate misattunement.
Yeah, tell me about the Yes, Madam one.
Okay, so this company, Yes, Madam, they sent out a corporate well-being survey to their employees, asking them to honestly report their stress levels, which sounds great.
It is. Sounds very attuned.
But then they sent an email pretending to fire anyone who reported feeling stressed.
What? That is insane.
I know. They later claimed it was just a quote-unquote publicity stunt to raise awareness about workplace stress.
That is literally inflicting trauma disguised as a wellness check. Unbelievable.
Or look at Party City. They knew they were facing impending bankruptcy. But instead of being transparent, they secretly recalled their entire product development team from overseas and then literally locked the corporate doors on their employees right before Christmas with zero severance pay.
It is honestly unbelievable that leaders think they can operate that way and survive long term. And what's even more fascinating to me is what happens when leaders finally realize they have a trust problem. Their new favorite shortcut is trying to outsource the attunement to technology.
Oh, yes. Welcome to the AI trap.
Yes, the AI trap. The book shares this incredible story of a highly critical manager named Akil. He received terrible 360-degree feedback from his team about his abrasive, punishing management style. He knows he needs to apologize, so what does he do? He goes to ChatGPT, types in his problem, and the AI generates the absolute perfect, emotionally intelligent, vulnerable apology script.
And he took that script and he read it verbatim to his team.
He read it word for word. The text was literally flawless. But while he was reading this beautiful, vulnerable AI apology, he was standing up, physically towering over his seated team, with his arms aggressively crossed defensively across his chest.
Oh, no.
Yes. His biological state, his body language, completely betrayed the mathematically perfect words. The team didn't trust a single syllable, he said, because their nervous systems were reading his crossed arms, not his vocabulary.
This raises such an important question for where we are right now. If an AI fundamentally cannot detect human nuance, how can we possibly expect it to manage human teams?
You can't.
Large language models are literally just predicting the next mathematically probable word based on training data. They do not possess a nervous system, they don't have a model of the human mind, and they certainly cannot co-regulate a panicked employee. There was this chilling Stanford study where an AI therapy chatbot was analyzing a human user.
Oh, I read about this. This is terrifying.
The user said they had just lost their job, felt totally hopeless, and asked the bot about tall bridges in the area. A human therapist instantly recognizes that as a coded, desperate crisis concerning self-harm.
Of course.
But the AI, lacking any relational intelligence whatsoever, just happily provided the user with a helpful list of the tallest bridges to visit.
It's just so dangerous, and major corporations are finding out about these limitations the hard way. Klarna tried to replace 40% of their customer service staff with AI, assuming it was just a simple data exchange job.
And how did that go?
Terrible. They faced such a massive backlash from furious customers who felt entirely misunderstood that they were forced to totally backtrack. Even the most advanced multi-billion-dollar models like Anthropic's Claude or Google's Gemini, they failed spectacularly when researchers placed them in simulated corporate environments. They just lack the basic common sense, the contextual awareness, and the social skills required to navigate office politics or de-escalate human friction.
To see what real, unoutsourceable human attunement looks like, we really have to look at leaders who understand that trust is their most valuable asset, not efficiency, trust.
Right. Like who?
Look at Satoru Iwata, the former CEO of Nintendo. When their Wii U console failed commercially, conventional business wisdom would have dictated mass layoffs to satisfy the shareholders.
Right. Trim the fat.
Exactly. But instead, Iwata took a personal 50% pay cut to protect his employees' jobs.
Wow, 50%?
Because he knew that an environment of fear completely kills the creative process. By maintaining trust and psychological safety, he retained the brilliant talent that eventually went on to create the wildly successful Nintendo Switch.
That is such a stark contrast. Or look at Chef Hector Boiardi.
Oh, the real Chef Boyardee.
Yeah, the actual guy. After World War II, his lucrative military contracts dried up. The standard financial advice was to lay off thousands of his loyal factory workers to save the bottom line. But instead of doing that, he chose to sell his entire company.
He sold the company to save their jobs.
Yes. And he sold it on the strict, non-negotiable condition that the new owners keep every single one of his workers employed. He literally placed the survival of his people above his own ongoing empire.
That is just incredible.
So what does this all mean for us today? It means that relational intelligence is absolutely not a quote-unquote soft skill. It is the hard, unbreakable foundation of business survival. While an AI might be able to write your quarterly proposal or, optimize your supply chain or debug your code, it cannot read a room.
Never.
It cannot pick up on the subtle, terrified tension in a team member's voice. And it certainly cannot build the deep, sacrificial trust required to pull a company through a crisis.
It all starts with the individual, honestly. Regulating your own nervous system, learning to recognize your triggers, and using that reset method we talked about, that is the mandatory first step. You cannot effectively lead or collaborate with others if your own prefrontal cortex is constantly offline.
You're just reacting.
Exactly. And once you are regulated, choosing to ditch the fixer mentality and doing the hard work of being an explorer, that builds the exact kind of deep psychological safety that drives genuine innovation and loyalty.
So to you listening right now, whether you are a CEO making decisions for thousands of employees, a middle manager caught in that endless squeeze, or just someone trying to survive a toxic team dynamic, you have agency here. Practicing these stealth grounding techniques and approaching your colleagues with genuine curiosity rather than judgment, it will immediately change the texture and the quality of your daily work life.
It will. And I will leave you with this final thought to mull over. As AI continues its inevitable march, automating the technical hard skills that used to completely define our value in the marketplace, we have to fundamentally reevaluate what our work actually is. The messy, uncomfortable, friction-filled interactions we have with our coworkers, the misunderstandings, the repairs, the navigating of bruised egos, those aren't distractions from our quote-unquote real work.
No, they are the work.
They are the real work. They are the exact training ground we need to develop the one remaining skill a machine can never replicate.
Well said. So, the next time that slacker coworker drops the ball, don't just react to the symptom, take 90 seconds, regulate yourself, and dive a little deeper. You might just find that the most valuable work you do all day is simply choosing to be human.